Hi, I'm Laura, your connection coach. Have you ever felt lonely? In a world that feels increasingly divided, it is more important than ever to find ways to connect with others. Loneliness is a common experience, but it doesn't have to be a permanent one. On the Bliss Republic podcast, we explore all the ways we connect with each other and discuss the benefit of having strong relationships. We believe that the key to overcoming loneliness is connection. My guests come from all walks of life and will hear about their unique experience with connection. Whether you're looking to deepen your existing relationships, build new ones, or simply feel more connected to the world around you, the Bliss Republic podcast is for you. Today we have Matty Powell here, also known as my good friend Matty. We met at an event.
Yeah, it was that breath work.
Embodiment, breath work,
dance,
ecstatic
dance.
So Matt is not only an author, he has just released a book, but also a mentor and teacher and writer. You have pretty much worked so far with young children, and in particular I want to talk about working with young men. And is there something that has drawn you into working as a teacher, and how do you see this area shifting?
Yeah. When I left school, I dove straight into university, into a different course. It was kind of like engineering, maths sort of space. And in the back of my mind, I always think I wanted to be a teacher. Ended up shifting into teaching or education at university.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, but I kind of never looked back. So I'm like in humanities, history and geography and culture and people and all that sort of stuff. And then I remember when I was 21, I went to Europe for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a full-on kind of boys trip, I guess, and a lot of fun and partying and drinking and all that sort of stuff when you're 21. But I also remember walking around, Germany and Paris and London and even history over the last 100 years. You're walking around, Berlin, for example, and I remember there's kind of like these holes in certain buildings from shrapnel in World War II and things like that. It's like, wow, it's like so vivid in Europe. And I've really enjoyed it. Like, it's been really fulfilling. What I've realized is teaching is part of the job, but then the other part of the job is actually relationships.
In what sense?
Most of what I do, or what I've realized teaching, is about relationships and building rapport. Yeah, sort of having empathy and compassion and obviously having that student-teacher boundary and relationship, but also just, having like that friendly face or asking them the odd question, what's going on in their life and things like that.
Yeah.
And, I think we can all look back and we have those teachers in our lives who maybe, for 12 months or a year or two had an impact on our lives. I definitely had a couple of teachers who come to mind as I say that. And I'm not saying that I'm like that for everyone, of course I'm not, but hopefully made a difference in a few lives at that, sort of really interesting age when you're growing up. I had a couple of inspiring teachers and actually sports coaches. I love playing sport. I had a couple of coaches, one in particular who was quite influential, and when you're sort of facing those sort of just slightly challenging moments together as well, you're just building those bonds as a team.
Yeah.
So that's what he was really amazing at.
How did he foster that? Like, how did he achieve you guys building a team? What was different from other teachers?
He was very approachable. He was just a lot more authentic and almost like sort of like friend/mentor when he was our coach. He was also all in, like he was just there all the time. He was like the first to arrive, like the last to leave.
What are some of the biggest struggles that students face nowadays?
I think about this a lot, and it differs from boys and girls. So it's maybe worth breaking down different genders.
For boys?
Yeah, for boys, sure. Unfortunately, I think schools just are not conducive to young teenage boys and their bodies and their hormones and what's going on in their lives. They can be great places, and I've seen a lot of awesome things happening in schools. But at the same time, like, I get it, it's a system, it's a certain type of system. It's been around potentially the last 150 odd years, where it's kind of like, without going into the whole history behind it, but it's kind of like with the Industrial Revolution, it was like, all right, it was the invention of essentially public schools or state schools.
Yeah.
And so like, how can we teach the most amount of kids, the most efficiently, essentially?
Yeah.
So it's, we'll put them in rows, we'll have a teacher up the front, sit down, be quiet, and we'll just dictate, and it's rote memory and learning. And then that's pretty much the story of the HSC or exams. It's sort of like who remembers the most facts to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And especially for young men and especially young boys, sitting down for 5 minutes, let alone 30, 45, 50 minutes is really, really challenging. Like even for myself, it's becoming more and more almost boy in terms of sort of lunch times are being shortened.
So you mean the time outside of the room?
Exactly.
Yeah.
More and more supervision, which isn't a bad thing, but just, for example, like less just sort of like running around and playing touch or playing soccer.
Yeah.
It's just like so sanitized and so much supervision. And then the other comment is definitely a feminization of the education system, but you have 95% of teachers who are now women, and especially in the primary school space. And I have friends and colleagues whose sons go to primary schools and there's actually no male teachers in the whole school. So these young boys might go through their whole primary education, and especially if they maybe dad might not be around or parents are divorced, they just essentially have women influence for their whole kind of like formative years. So it's really interesting, and it's really perhaps challenging. Like they actually don't come across a positive male role model if they don't have a father at home.
What are the things that they might be lacking because of it?
That positive figure, that role model, essentially. How to act and behave in the world.
Yeah.
Structure, boundaries. It's almost like this mother-father dynamic. The mother has this beautiful unconditional love element to her, but then there's that father conditional love type role. When a man walks into a room for the kids, it's kind of like there's just those slightly firmer maybe rules and boundaries and things like that. And it's just, a lot of it is also unspoken. It's just sort of like this energy. And I definitely see that and feel that when, 12, 13-year-old boys are running around. I feel like my presence maybe just calms them down a little bit, like maybe their nervous systems to a certain extent.
I have a question about that. So I heard once that a male grows up entirely surrounded by only women. One of the main things missing is rough play.
Yeah.
And the ability to set boundaries in a physical realm.
I know Jordan Peterson has sort of talks about this a lot for those exact reasons, and just finding that edge, like, okay, I'm at that edge, we're playing, we're wrestling, but no one's hurt. Also just for their bodies, that physical kind of strength and energy.
But also as a release, don't you think?
As a release, for sure. And then unfortunately, and I'm not sure if that many people are aware of it, you have these just energetic young boys. 50% of their parents are now split. And so they're energetic, they're running around, they can't sit still in their chairs. Teachers are complaining to the parents. Little Johnny's constantly getting in trouble, he can't concentrate. So what happens is that he gets referred to the psychiatrist or the counselor, or whoever it is. And then unfortunately in the medical industrial complex that we live in, they are medicated. And so we now have a situation where it's...
At what age do you think?
Like just 8, 9, 10, whatever.
Jesus,
But it's 25% of boys, 1 in 4, medicated.
What percentage of female teachers, you said?
90. I would say it's 90% for sure.
And no one sees that there is a correlation.
This conversation is out there, but I'm just not sure if many people want to hear it. A lot of mums are actually switching on because they have sons and they have their sons and they love them and they care about them. So they're waking up to this fact. Yes, perhaps there is a small percentage of boys who maybe would benefit from some sort of medication. I'm no expert, but when it's like 1 in 4, and maybe they just need to join the local soccer team and just run around for an hour, and then maybe they go home and they're gaming and they're not, again. To go further down the rabbit hole, you have these boys who are maybe overly medicated, maybe have this, whatever issues that may or may not lead to in terms of their development or their social skills. And then you have young men who've been medicated for maybe like 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is. They struggle to maybe relate with women or make friends or whatever it might be. And this is now manifesting in the world. There's a correlation, like these shooters in America, for example. A lot of them are actually just on like psych medication.
Yeah. But it is quite interesting, you as a teacher having that insight. Thanks for sharing that. We do have, especially here on the Northern Beaches, a very high rate of male suicides. And I think as women, we don't ask enough the question as to why does that happen and what's going wrong here. And I see that there is a big trend in our society where we're pushing this female agenda, the non-binary agenda. These are all very strong concepts that don't really support the male per se. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about mental health for young men?
I think it's really challenging to be a young man in 2023, 24, whatever, in this society right now. I think, when we grew up, it was kind of on the cusp of that kind of like internet sort of, generation, social media. I think the smartphone came out in, 2010 or something like that. And I'm just glad that I had a childhood. Maybe like our generation might have been like the last to a certain extent. I just think it's really challenging, or would be really challenging, to be a teenage boy, and you've just got so many mixed messages, especially coming through the screen, and not necessarily just mixed messages, but distractions.
Right.
Gaming, like Netflix or whatever. There is a conversation for girls as well, and their own challenges with social media. But every year the average amount of screen time is becoming more and more and more. And you see less and less kids out on the street. And then you compound that with the mainstream sort of narrative that, this idea of like toxic masculinity and what does it mean to be a man. And there aren't necessarily that many positive role models. Perhaps the 60s and the 70s and that whole civil rights movement. And there was like Muhammad Ali and Martin Luther King and all these amazing musicians, and Bob Dylan and John Lennon and the Beatles, and even world leaders back then actually maybe had a lot more character. Whereas now, who are the top 5 male role models in the world? It's Messi, Dan Bilzerian, whatever, like these, Justin Bieber, essentially just people who have the most followers. They're not people necessarily of character. And then the other thing, there are no rites of passage. For tens of thousands of years throughout humanity, throughout cultures across continents, boys would turn a certain age, 12, 13, 14, whatever it might be, and they would be taken by the men of the tribe and undergo some sort of physical challenge or a rite of passage. In Kenya, for example, or that part of the world, they would literally go and hunt lions with the men. And when you came back, you were initiated as a warrior, as a man. Imagine like being that boy when you come back with the men and you've maybe killed a lion or you participated in that ceremony. Just that level of purpose and mission and direction, and also like love for your tribe and community. Like it's very, very, very deep and powerful. And like I said, humans figured this out across the world. In Indigenous Australia, there's often, there would be cuttings, you'd go away with the men to certain locations up or down the coast. There would often be like, you can see on photos like just scars on their chest where there would be cutting.
Wow.
There would be like some sort of ceremony or like a sharing of like a Dreamtime story, the physical removal of a tooth.
Oh, wow.
But then every time you played with your teeth, with your tongue, what do you remember? That story or that moment with the men of the tribe. The problem is that if boys don't experience rites of passage, they have no like line in the sand where it's like, okay, now I'm actually officially a man of the tribe. So what we have essentially now in the Western world is boys in fully grown male bodies. You can see that when you just walk down the street or whatever, and it's just that boy psychology of, bravado and self-centeredness and ego and, conquering and material possessions and even treating women certain ways and things like that. They're just fully grown men, but who are essentially boys.
2 things that you mentioned, I think, are really standing out for me. And that is direction and purpose. Women, we're not meant to be the leaders of the tribe. We're not, in my mind and how I perceive the world to function well.
This theme actually comes up in a lot of mythology. Mythology is not just story, it's actually like deep, deep wisdom or even truth. In a lot of myths, there's this notion of the young boy
Mm-hmm.
where it's like he leaves the tribe, he goes on his adventure, and essentially what that separation is or represents is a separation away from mom's cuddles,
Yeah.
from the safety of your mom or your mother. There comes a time in a young boy's life or a young man's life, like we said, 13, 14, 15,
Mm-hmm.
where it's time for him to go and leave the safety of essentially like mom's breast or boob or whatever, you know. It's literally like, it's a metaphor, and that's also a challenge for a lot of mothers out there, because then there's the narrative or the stereotype of the archetype of like mothers who don't let their sons go out on their own 2 feet, and then you have these, you know, these, I guess it's the stereotype of these 35, 40-year-old men living in mom's basement.
Right.
We were talking the other day, but like the movie The Joker, which is a great movie, that's the character of the Joker who's living with his mother.
Yeah.
And then again, so that's the archetype of the devouring mother. It's the story of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
So the witch in the forest is like, no, stay here, my love. I'll feed you. I'll give you gingerbread. I'll fatten you up. But then she actually eats them. And that's, again, a beautiful myth story highlighting what actually happens to the psychology of these individuals.
So if the mother takes over, the boys have no chance to stand on their own feet.
Yep.
And
They don't become a man. They don't become a man. They stay a boy.
Yeah.
They stay a boy. And then, so for young boys, like they need to have, that's where the father, or essentially maybe like the uncles or the father and uncles of the tribe, recognize this. And that's why they would, again, metaphorically take the young boy out into the wilderness and, you know, almost take him away from the mother. And again, that's another perhaps issue in our society. Some of the issues with men in today's world is maybe they're lacking that direction from the uncles and that father figure to actually like, all right, come on, it's time. It can happen with the tribe in a healthy manner. Like, all right, let's go away camping for a weekend and we're going to talk about men stuff. Or young men end up doing it informally anyway, but they do it in an unhealthy way. So it's alcohol, you know, speeding down the highway, you know, jumping off the second story into the backyard swimming pool. Like doing reckless things to prove that they're a man. I guess in Australia, like an easy one is, you know, who can have the most beers. And then I'm a man now, kind of thing.
So self-destructive behavior.
Yeah, exactly. So men will do it, or young men will do it anyway, but it's just a matter of whether it's in a healthy or a not so healthy way.
So let's talk about your book. You wrote a book, Life on Your Terms, a rough guide to discovering your true path. And one of the things that caught my attention is the reason for suffering and how to manage it. Can you expand on that?
Sure. What influenced my thoughts on that particular chapter were largely Buddhist teachings, and Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a really amazing. He passed away a couple of years ago. Buddhist master/teacher. What the Buddha teaches is that life is suffering. We don't have a choice. You know, we're born into these bodies, into this life, and no matter what, we're all going to experience suffering. And most people, most of the time, we either live in the past, and that's regret, or we live worrying about the future, or we think about worrying about the future, which is anxiety. And this is like, you know, I have this battle as well. I think if you understand, or at least start to unpack some of these concepts and how much of my time or how many of my thoughts are in the past or in the future, and just sort of catching that. So this was, I guess, this idea of suffering, how you can manage a little bit of suffering. And a couple of big lessons for me over the last couple of years has been accepting and letting go, or surrender. That's probably been one of the biggest lessons for me over the last couple of years is letting go. And
do you have an example?
Yeah, sure. Probably during the whole COVID years, I was caught up on perhaps a lot of sort of maybe anger, helplessness, and anger towards maybe the government or policies or lockdown, and, you know, like what's going on. And then one day, I remember sort of just getting caught up on relationships or people, or the internet's an interesting sort of realm, like just getting, like, I remember getting caught up in the news sometimes.
Right, yeah.
And sort of like sometimes it would trigger me, and then I'd be like, why am I watching this? But my point is, like, even today, if I were to watch the news, or like an election would come up, or the voice debate, or, it's literally every 5 or 6 months there's the next topic.
Right.
Pick your
Yeah.
topic, climate change,
Yeah.
like feminism, whatever, this division, and I could attach or latch onto strong opinions on either side of the spectrum, and I used to 4 or 5 years ago, and I really enjoy those conversations still, and having interesting conversations and sharing opinions and stuff. But now I'm like not actually attached to winning for example, I have to win this argument as an argument where I have to, whatever. And that's obviously just ego. And I remember with the whole COVID situation and the lockdowns and the mandates and all that sort of stuff, it was like I was giving a lot of my power over to external, the government, because essentially I couldn't work for 6 weeks. I was actually in my room stewing over my stance, and sitting in your room for 6 weeks is a long time to sort of like build up anger and resentment at the world.
I know.
And I remember walking down the road one day, and I was just like, just let it go.
Yeah.
I remember it was just like this huge kind of black cloud that was on my back, just kind of like, everything will probably be okay. Yeah. Everything's just a lesson.
I had a similar experience where for me during that time as well, you have to make a decision. And I said to myself, I don't have to make a decision now. I allow myself to remove time out of the equation. That just was my moment of letting it just be for now.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Another cool one to add to that is one more day. Can you get through one more day?
Right.
And you probably can, or you can get through one more day, and then you wake up tomorrow and it's like you survived.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, one more day, and then another day, and then another day, and then like 100 days later, it's kind of gone away, or whatever happens. The solution arrives.
The hero's journey. Can you give us an overview of what the hero's journey is?
Sure. So the hero's journey, I guess, was introduced by a mythologist by the name of Joseph Campbell, who spent his whole life as like an academic writing about or studying myths around the world, similar to rites of passage, what I was talking about earlier. And what he discovered was that all these cultures from different civilizations, from different times, had a similar narrative. And this narrative is the hero's journey. It's essentially the story of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. You have the protagonist, whether it's a boy or a girl, in the ordinary world, in their comfort zone. They have a call to adventure. They accept the call, go out on that journey, gain a little bit more experience. You meet your allies and your friends. Along the journey, you'll meet a mentor, which is an important part of it. You then face your final obstacle or face the dragon, or it's called like maybe the dark night of the soul.
What does that mean in real life?
What it means is that, so we all have like our biggest fear or our biggest challenge, like what is holding you or I back right now, whether it's some sort of addiction or a challenge or something at work or a relationship or whatever it might be. I think we all probably have something that, and for some people it's quite a big dragon. For some, maybe it's not as big yet. Slaying that metaphorical dragon, the beast, whatever you want to call it, and then once you've done that, you attain the treasure in these stories. It may be gold. It might be the Holy Grail. It might be the Virgin Princess, which is that metaphor as well. The Buddha reaches enlightenment. That's like the demons appear in his vision, and he touches the ground and they disappear, and then he reaches enlightenment. So it's like you attain this treasure, which is just a metaphor for maybe insight or wisdom, or you learned the lesson, or love or joy, or whatever you want to call it. The final stage is the return back to the original place or the village or home, but you're not the person that you once were. You're no longer the caterpillar. You're now the butterfly, and you've returned to perhaps offer your gifts or the gold or the wisdom or the joy or the love or whatever it might be.
That's beautiful.
And it's cyclical, but then it's also the journey which you can see in nature. A seed falls into the ground. There's almost this call to adventure. It births, it sprouts. It has this whole challenge to sort of grow into a sapling or whatever, and then eventually this huge, beautiful red gum or redwood, whatever sort of tree. Turtle hatches on the beach, has to get its way down into the ocean, and it's probably not going to survive, but it might, and then it's got to go through the currents and the predators and the waves, and hopefully it can get somewhere out there and then grow and meet friends and allies and become a fully grown turtle. So it's not just a human narrative. It's actually almost kind of this model for the universe, is what I would say. It's a beautiful worldview. It's like you can actually apply it to your own life. So where am I on this journey? Is there something calling me? Am I in the middle of a battle right now? Have I maybe met a mentor recently? A relationship could be a hero's journey.
Yeah.
You know, you sort of have a call to maybe being with someone, and then you go through your challenges. And then, you know, parenthood would be a massive hero's journey.
Yeah.
Careers, so on and so forth. There's many going on.
Besides what you mentioned earlier on the initiation in the tribe, I would really like to win your insight on males building on confidence. How can someone gain confidence confronted with the awakening experience?
Wow, what a question. One thing that I would recommend is finding your tribe. I think is really important. Like, you're not alone. And thankfully, I think with social media and things like that, there is also not so good people maybe out there spreading stuff, but there's also, I think, a lot of positive influences, and everyone has their own, you know, inclinations to who they feel they resonate with. I think it's like a gut feeling. But also in your local community, you know, there are people who are going to be like-minded, who you can have conversations with, who you can spend time with and have fun with and do things with. And then there are also things that you can do. For example, I went to like this men's weekend a month or two ago, which just came up on my radar recently, but it was like such an amazing, epic weekend of kind of like-minded men and brothers. And we were sort of out on land, out in the bush, kind of just doing cool things together and hanging out.
What are cool things that men do in the bush?
Sure. run around naked, playing the drums, playing the bongos. No. It was called The Gathering of Men. Half of it was almost this like kind of free time where it was just really nice just to chill and hang out and catch up with men over 3 days. And we had this kind of we'll put the phones away essentially for 3 days as well.
Fantastic.
You know, yeah. Like you could, you know, go and text someone if you wanted to, but we kind of just put them in the bags for 3 days. Like, for example, there were a couple musicians like just jamming around the drums and the guitar for like 45 minutes. And like, we're just like in the present moment completely. But then the other part of it was that we did these activities. One of them was we actually did wrestling, which was really activating for me personally. Like, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. Because it's been a long time since I played actually probably sport, and tapped into that essentially inner warrior type of energy. Because when another man's trying to get you to the ground, it's like, no. So it was really activating, especially for a lot of men who've maybe neglected that part of themselves for a long time.
I was about to say, I never see men do that. Like, I do have old memories in my head of like when I was a teenager and guys would start a fight at a concert or at a club you went to or these things. But I can honestly not tell you the last time I experienced anything like it. But we females are still being so overprotective of that space that it's so obvious men need. So how can a male being in a very modern relationship make sure that his needs are being met?
I think personally that all men could or should be in some sort of brotherhood or a men's group. Yeah. I've been on this journey the last 2 or 3 years, and I was in a group for about 12 months, and I've recently started my own.
You started your own brotherhood?
Yeah. We've been catching up for about 3 or 4 months now, just at my place actually. But it's been also like a cool journey, and there's a lot of really cool insights to that. A problem with a lot of men is loneliness, I would suggest, and, you know, going to work and working hard and hustling and grinding and coming home, and, you know, the nuclear family is maybe you and your partner and maybe the kids. And I think I don't think, like, women have been really amazing at maintaining their sisterhood and their female friendships, but men not so much. And traditionally in Australia, it's, you know, let's meet at the pub and watch the footy. And there's a time and a place for that. You know, I enjoy watching the footy, and I'll see them here on the northern beaches. It's actually just like you'll see a group of old men like having a coffee after a surf. Like, that's essentially what we're talking about. Yeah, that's maybe their informal brotherhood. But yeah, I think it's really important for a man to have a group of men, friends, brothers that he can talk to, things that he can talk to that he doesn't want to share with his partner. And not everything's supposed to be shared with his partner, or maybe he has things that he wants to share about their relationship or whatever, or
That's interesting.
his own men's kind of men's issues.
Can I just tag on to that? Because I think, especially as women being raised, what we just mentioned, women are so natural in just sharing and raising their voice to say, I need something, because it's been so promoted in the last years. But like for men, I think being loud and raising your voice and saying, I need something, has not been promoted at all whatsoever. Women may have a difficulty understanding why a man wouldn't share everything with their partner. Can you expand on that? And what does it mean with men needing to have a safe space with men to talk about things that they may not want to talk about with their girlfriends?
It's different energy. For example, if I were to share something with my bros, I'm going to get a different reaction or different response. And it's that conditional love. If I'm falling short, or if I'm essentially out of integrity, and you have a group of bros where that's an agreement that you want to live a life where you're essentially supporting each other, where it's like, hey bro, come back into integrity, like you stuffed up there. Or you have like your bros will challenge you, and they also like will hold you to accountability. Again, there's this energetic like nourishment of being around or with your bros or with your men of the tribe, and again, it goes back to sort of like that anthropological kind of sitting around the fire with the men. And then
it sounds amazing, by the way.
No, it is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure most men listening to this have experienced that. In addition, like your partner is equally as amazing and beautiful, but it's just different what you want to share with your partner. And you might share the same things, but you're just going to maybe get a different response. So you're going to get that feminine, maybe nurturing kind of loving aspect, when maybe you want that kind of like more masculine kind of container. So it's just different.
It's interesting. I must say, however, that with my girlfriends, we do share a lot, but we don't hold each other at check. There is not this conditional sort of, yes, but I know that you told me. I know I do that a lot, and I know that my friends always are like, oh my gosh, she's right, but
but that's you being in your masculine, though.
That's true. That's very true. Highly aware of that. And the thing is, though, that I have it, by the way, it's one of the things that I'm working on my hero's journey, to overcome the masculine energy of my mother that she's passed down to me.
That's amazing to hear that you're like aware.
Oh yeah,
cool.
I'm on it.
Great.
But maybe I shouldn't be on it, because that's also
no, work on it. Yeah, sure.
We'll work on it. Yeah. So what was one of the biggest things that have impacted you on your journey?
A big part of my journey was probably travel. And I was lucky enough to go traveling, in my earlier mid-20s. In particular, I remember I went on one quite transformative trip to India, and that just probably started to put me on this sort of, train line. When you're sort of in a foreign country, especially like in maybe an Eastern country, and the food's different, and the language is different, and the colors and the sounds, and the honking and the horns and the people, and the culture's so different. It's almost like this psychedelic experience where it's like your reality is just completely altered forever. And I remember coming back to Australia, and I love Australia, but it's just a different way of life. And I remember thinking, like, you don't actually have to participate in the rat race. You don't actually have to just go down the checklist. There's actually an infinite ways to live your life, to live in a van and just be happy and free and surf. Like, if that's the definition of success for you, well, then you're successful. And in fact, the opposite of just working for 40 years and having a heart attack when you're 65, but having millions of dollars, that's not success. That's a pretty miserable life. For me, like, I've just kind of realized that I want rich experiences, and essentially, like, an important word for me is depth. I think I crave a level of depth.
Where does that come from?
I believe that I'm probably quite an old soul in that regard. Like, I feel like my soul's been on this journey, for maybe thousands of lifetimes. That's where it comes from. I think the fact that I was also born in South Africa, and it's a little bit of being a little bit of like, I don't feel like a foreigner, but it's just like slightly different, like, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if you can relate, but just like it's like
not fully. You're in both worlds. In
a
way.
little
Yes,
bit.
like not entirely 100% of you here.
Yeah,
and
a little
there's
bit.
always, I think, travel opens that door as well as Pandora's box. And I've certainly experienced many times traveling where it's like, let me just get out of my bubble because there's this vastness of options of how I can live my life.
Yeah.
And it's such a good reminder and so beautiful. Which leads me to the question, what is your purpose in life?
The big questions. I've stole this answer, but a really beautiful answer is simply to experience it. My purpose is to experience it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. I really liked that when I heard it. You know, there's no gold medal, there's no like attaining, achieving, whatever, conquering. It's just like to experience it. And sometimes I think I probably need to remind myself of that answer, you know, getting caught in maybe the routine sometimes, in the mundane and going to work and things like that. But I'm back on that path. I think, you know, next year, as I've told you, I'm sort of starting the next adventure and chapter. So I'm looking forward to that and just having more experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. I will hope to see a lot more coming through.
What's your purpose?
I love that. Thanks for handing it right back. I believe my purpose is very deep reaching, to do with my ancestors. I believe it's my purpose to heal a wound that has been passed on to me. And with that comes also my purpose of being a mother. What used to be a wound, healed, to transform it so that the wound no longer gets passed on, but to pass on the learnings from that. You come back from your hero's journey and you come back home, and all the lessons and learnings you've had, you share them, and you leave the pain where it was. Yeah.
Amazing. Very powerful. Very deep.
Thank you.
Great.
I do have one final question that I'm going to ask everyone. What is the most important thing you have learned about love in your life?
Another banger. Oh man, I could talk so much about this, but like I might share two things. The first one is that like a relationship or love, a beautiful metaphor is to look at it like two butterflies visit each other, you know, on a leaf, and it may be, you know, for a moment, for a season, for life, but there's this element of free will, and they meet together. And as soon as you try to capture a butterfly or put it in a glass jar, it's going to suffocate or die.
Yeah.
It's a big part of actually free will, and that's been a big part of my journey actually, and probably why I am the way I am, and a free spirit. But then the other part, or another big lesson that it's taught me, is you need to be whole and love yourself and confident with who you are and know who you are before you can really essentially be in a relationship or love another person. You know, I think a lot of relationships, or a lot of people look to be in a relationship for someone to actually feel in a hole, or they need someone. It's like a need, like I need you, I need this, I need attention, I need companionship, I need, you know, physical affection, where it's actually, you need to be at the level where you're actually content in your own skin.
Yes.
And then when you meet that person who's hopefully at the same level, it's just this beautiful like addition, or union's a beautiful word. You know, it's not like there's no neediness, there's no attachment. And I had that lesson from a breakup where an ex-girlfriend of mine left me, and I was like so attached, and the ego is playing all these games like oh no, like, you know, you're supposed to be with me, and how dare you, and, you know, attach, and you know, the whole jealousy game and all that sort of stuff. But if I actually truly loved her, like the butterfly metaphor, well, how should I have reacted? Well, it would have been, thank you so much for the beautiful experience, I wish you well in your journey. But at the time, you know, I was much younger and less wise, but it was like my relationship sort of validated who I was, as opposed to just being content in my own skin.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Very beautiful. So I think if people want to know a little bit more about you and maybe what is coming up for you on your journey, as well as finding out more where to buy your book, where can they go to?
Yeah, just hit me up on probably Instagram's the best place to just see where all my stuff is. My link to
What's your
my
Instagram?
offerings. It's Matty J Powell.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. Thank you very much for joining my
Yeah,
podcast.
thanks so much. I really enjoyed our chat.
Good.
I feel like I was rambling most of the time or hogging the conversation, but no, I really enjoyed it. So thank
Great.
you, Lara.
Thank you. Thanks for being
Awesome.
on. Oh, cheers. Awesome.
Nice. That was great.
If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and share this episode with someone who can benefit from it. Have a beautiful day, bliss and bless.